Women would like to thank BIPOC Executive Search for sponsoring today's episode.
The BIPOC Executive Search app is here for you. Get information about job opportunities we're recruiting for. Keep up to date and in the know about career news tailored to Indigenous, Black, and other racialized audiences. Gain helpful tips and learnings to help you on your career trajectory, celebrate job appointments, and more. The BIPOC Executive Search app, here to elevate the candidate experience for Black, Indigenous, and communities of color. Free to download and available on iPhone and Android smartphones.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 woman growing strong. 100 woman where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny, woman.
100 ABC Women would like to take this opportunity to welcome our viewers and listening audience, families, friends, and our sponsors to our inspirational conversations, fireside chats with 100 ABC honorees. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold initiative created by the co-authors, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, a former MP, Donna Jones-Simmons, a corporate diversity executive, and Dr. Denise O'Neill-Green, Vice President, Equity and Community Inclusion at Ryerson University. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as a website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. We are pleased to bring you a series of fireside chats which include conversations around education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, legal, technology, entrepreneurship, diversity and equity, media, engineering, politics, sports, and so much more. These, we know, are topics that matter to us and to you. These educational and inspirational conversations will be made available to all current and future generations via our 100 ABC YouTube channel. This is a great way to learn from our elders, brilliant-minded and accomplished Black Canadian women. Join me as I welcome moderator Jennifer Singh. Jennifer has been second home for nearly decades. She's a former international student and alumnus comfort level on the Seneca campus, which was enhanced when she was appointed the inaugural dean of the newly created Faculty of International Studies. This is yet another milestone achievement for Jennifer. She was the first international student from Guyana to enroll at Seneca shortly after migrating to Canada. Over to you, Jennifer.
Good afternoon. It gives me great pleasure to introduce one of Canada's athletes who sprinted and hurdled her way onto the track and field scene. Her name is Yvette Blackburn, and this afternoon we will talk about some of the secrets of being an athlete, as well as her opinions on what's happening in the sports scene today. Welcome, Yvette.
Thank you and good afternoon. Trust everything is all well with you and your family, Jennifer.
That is so. Thank you.
Very good.
So, Yvette, give us some idea of what it was like to be an athlete in the 80s, I think it was.
Yeah, so 80s and the bit of the early 90s with University of Windsor Track and Field, and growing up, from Windsor, the little small city that could in southwestern Ontario, is actually though one of the hotbeds of actually a lot of prominent track and field distance, middle distance, and hurdle champions. Angie Kuhn, we have Snyders, we have several Olympians who come out of the Windsor area. But just running track as a whole back in the day, it was a really good team builder. You were able to understand the whole genesis of what it is to compete as one, because also being a member of relays, you just take in the benefits of all individuals and what they bring. Plus, you understand to hone your own personal aspect of that can-do mentality, that you have to overcome both the pain, even the adversities and the different challenges that come to bear, and really rely on yourself at certain points to be able to see what's your fortitude to be able to accomplish.
Great. So how have some of those experiences and aptitudes prepared you for the career that you have today?
Wow. So being an educator and being involved with social justice activism is really part of what's my genesis, right? So track was something in which I did to stay in shape, for one. Two, it was one in which to be able to socialize on a different level, be able to see our province and our country and the world in a certain extent, depending on where we went for training or for meets. So in the everyday perspective of what's happening now, it helped to formulate, those opinions and the ability to be able to, understand where people are at, meet them at their positioning in life, be able to converse on various topics and different issues, be far more well-rounded. Also, again, to be very patient, to have that confidence within oneself, to be able to have time management, to meet deadlines, to know that you have to, again, surmount the challenges and the odds that might face you, to know that you have the ability to step up when the time is right, and have that conviction. So it prepared me in many ways for the issues that you face and I face within the educational field and dealing with the social activism that I do.
Great. Now, this year, I think in July, the Olympics will be held in Japan. An athlete trains for a certain period of time so they can peak by the time the Olympics comes around. The Olympics has already been postponed. What does that do to an athlete's training?
Well, it impacts a great deal. And I think what we're going to see is we may not see some of the number ones, the individuals, like, you think about a Justin Gatlin, this would have more or less been his last year coming on the scene to finally burst out because, Bolt is no longer there. This could have been his final Cinderella moment. But now he's had to wait 2 years. Now it might even be, right, the aspect, is he going to be at his game form, or are the younger athletes going to be able to come back from this? Same thing with Elaine Thompson coming out of her injuries. Will that year and a half we've waited, will that benefit her? Will she have now healed to a better level that she can really compete against Shelley or against, our young lady there from the States, and I just went Allison Felix. So there's a lot of issues at play. So I think for some, it's going to be a benefit. For others, it might be to their detriment. So, you do train, you do certain meets to help you to get that endurance and get the speed level, and you're hoping to peak. So many have now planned for this deadline that has now been, pushed back and set. So hopefully it will be success for many, but it depends on the protocols they're putting in place. How are they going to be dealing with their food and nutrition? A lot of things, right? So for me, I'm looking forward to seeing the Olympics because I love track and field. So obviously I want to see it and have it occur, because if we push it back, we're going to see many athletes not be on the playing field.
Yeah. One of the issues that has come up is that the Olympics will be held in July in Japan, which is the hottest period of time in Japan. And so it also puts another burden on the athletes to remain hydrated, especially in track and field. I mean, that is so important. Any thoughts on that?
But you know what? I don't think it's really going to impact most athletes. Can we see the Olympics have happened at Australia? They've occurred in some of the hottest places in the world have hosted the Olympics, and they have made the right, conditions set forward in the sense of having either misters or prevent trying to time out the race time. And it's up to the athlete. They're at the peak of their game. They're at the highest echelon of competition. So coaching staff would clearly advise with regards to the intake of their liquids, the time, the rest period. So all of those are being factored. And as an individual that's been to Japan, so konnichiwa, genki desu ka? It's a beautiful country. It's lush. It's great. They would go, bend over backwards to ensure that they have everything in place, as we see. And that's part of their issue, that they've taken a real hit with regards to their preparation and everything that they have done. They are very cordial people, and they will do everything, because part of their aspect is they take pride in making sure that everything is at the best that they provide to you, right? So I feel for the people, but I think that they're still going to put on a great Olympics as best as they can, pending the circumstances.
Great. Now, sticking with the topic of Olympics, there are those who feel that sports and politics don't mix. And there are others who feel that the Olympics is the ideal platform for athletes to speak out against social inequities, racial inequities, gender inequities. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a political bird, right? So listen, the IOC would be the perfect place. As we saw what happened with Mr. Smith and others, our fist on the platform of the winning stage, and then they were blackballed in the sense of not being able to get sponsorship, ridiculed, excused from not being able to be in any more of the competitive games. I think individuals should be able to speak their mindsets. They should be able to put on display what they deem. If they want to wear a black armband, they should. If they want to collectively raise their voice, they should be able to, as long as it doesn't take away from the field of play. So if it's not impact in that sense, then they should be able to do it. I know they put a few roadblocks that athletes now will be sanctioned if they were to do certain things or wear certain aspects, but I don't think we should be trying to muzzle individuals, as long as when they step up for whatever sport it might be, and they are there when the gun goes off or, the starter says go, then we should be prepared for that and give them their due credit and due recourse, because we're there watching them for their talents, but we also should be able to understand their mindsets and where they are dealing with the issues.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you that individuals should not be muzzled. The IOC has already said, though, that any athletes who are politically minded or express themselves politically outside of the chosen words that they can wear on their T-shirts will be banned. We don't know what the punishment will be as yet, but there will be punishment. And there's another organization or two organizations in Germany who said we are prepared to defend the athletes. So it's quite a topical issue in terms of free speech and sports, the mix of sports and politics.
Well, the IOC would be silly to implement that fully in that level, because think about it, if all of your top athletes decide to speak out and you're going to ban them, what would you have?
Yeah. The other thing is, if you look at the history of Olympics, there've always been politics involved, right, whether it's countries pulling out, whether it's individual athletes. So those who want to try and separate politics from the sport, I think they're fighting a losing battle, because the sport is political.
That is
I mean,
correct.
the IOC itself has gone through a lot of iterations in terms of some of their own internal politics. So
correct, even the appointments, right? The appointments that we see as to who's the president or who sits on the board. So it's very telling, because you think about the lack of diversity that's there, right? If we go even to Mr. Cole and his history of the various issues of racism and bias that has been leveled at him. So there's a great deal. So politics is always there, to your point.
Yeah. Okay, so let us look more locally at Canadian politics. Sorry, not Canadian politics, but sports in Canada. I read only today that Sports Canada hopes to achieve equity in sports by 2035. And that blew my mind. That's 11 years away. What are your thoughts on that?
My question then turns to this though, when they say equity in sport, are you going to ensure that every sport has a female team and a male team? Is that their aspect of equity? Is it a matter of taking away some sports so that way you can add in those that are then more female dominated? Like there's certain things that we have to look at. You know, people use the term feminist. I don't use the term feminist at all. The aspect is what is good, what brings forward the viewership, what allows females to be able to actively participate and engage and prevent and provide an arena of sport that is engaging and will bring the viewership, right? So it's great that that's their achievement, but I would still need to have more details. What does it really entail? Because if you're going to bring in categories where there's no viewership, what's the benefit? To just say that you had a women's sporting event, right? So there's so much that we really have to look at this, because when we're talking about the Olympics, you're talking about the crux, the highest echelon of competition and what's happening. We don't want to water this down, that it's all of a sudden that just for equity's sake, we put in a swimming pool event, right? And I'm being very frivolous when I say that, so not to take it seriously in a sense, but we have to be very mindful as to what we're seeking. If they can make sure that all the events that are being provided have an equal representation of male and female categories that are set forward, by all means. And even now, if we're going to talk about sports and categories, and there should also be then for transgender, so that way we don't have to deal with the other frameworks that's happening as to the encroachment into the female fields that is happening, right?
Okay. The other thing in terms of, well, there's gender equity and there's also racial equity, racial equality. I'm a basketball fan, and I've just noticed that certainly the Raptors, that's my team, you know, they had many referees who were females. The commentating team, you have color commentators that are female. Are we seeing any of that in let's say, track and field?
Well, yes, because when you think about some of the major league meets, we do have female commentators that are happening. We still have the dominant group of males, and more so it's the males when you talk about track and fields that are former Olympians, right? So when you talk about you know, Otto Bolton, you have Donovan, you have Michael Smith. There's different individuals that are commenting, but we do have female commentators that are now entering into the field. And that would be the conversation that has to be had. If we're talking about transparency and the equitable distribution, then yes, we would require more females to be present. And then that way it'll have the equal playing ground. So they're moving in the right direction, but we still have a lot of things that have to happen. When you talk about racial bias and what's there, you think about our Olympics and our male basketball teams, there's always been issues with regards to who's selected, who's been left out, who's made the captain, who's been the coaches for our basketball teams. You know, women's volleyball, who's represented there? What does that makeup look like? When you think about hockey, yes, we have now Black male athletes that are entering into hockey, and female Black athletes are entering into hockey, but it still comes down to economics and the means of opportunity to be able to do it. But we're seeing more, so we're entering into the foray of those sports. And more is happening. I think it's a matter of, again, providing the opportunities. If the opportunities and the doors are open for people to apply to be able to be in these positions, I would think we would have far more individuals being present, right? And I even brought up the name of Donovan Bailey. And when you think about what he had brought up for it, and Donovan's been championing this for a decade with regards to the discrimination that exists and you know, this whole aspect of nepotism, who is liked rather than who has the true ability, knowledge, and expertise to be able to speak on the topics that are at play.
Yeah. Are you involved in any sort of formal way with Athletics Canada so that you can put forward some of your opinions and some of your ideas?
I used to be part of the Ontario Track and Field, you know, the referee association were doing the officiating. I had let that fall by the wayside, but to your point, it's something that we need, several of us have been talking about it, getting ourselves back involved to really try to create and affect that change. because sitting on the outside because you might be a little bit disgruntled or disenfranchised with what is happening doesn't help to move that needle. So I will get back to it. I will try and get myself back certified in that framework. But as you know, a lot of the boards and the commissions are by appointment. So again, the nepotism, who is known, who is willing to, not speak out and stay silent and just take the little piddlings of this, little pay that they give you. And that's, again, the conversation of anti-Black racism and how it exists and to whom is willing to really continue within the colonial frameworks for those who speak out. If you speak out, they don't want you around, right? So that's that whole conversation that has to be at play. And even within us as Black individuals, we must really have our little sidebar conversations to say, what are we really there representing and to whom are we representing?
Yeah. One of the things that strikes me is that we have to struggle each and every year for what we want. And it's tiring. And there are times when you have to say, can I let this go? Or do I have to put myself in the line to affect change? And I'm not sure if there's an easy way to really affect change other than putting yourself on the line and trying to recruit new people so that you can renew your energy. But I think if we're not at the table, then we're forgotten. And if our voices aren't heard, then people don't realize that our voice is different than a white voice per se. They don't see, or they haven't walked in our shoes. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it depends on who. Remember, as TD Jakes has stated, some might be akin to you, but they're not akin to you, which is very important. So even though you may have Black faces at the table, their voice doesn't represent the majority, or their voice is not there to truly articulate what are the true benchmarks that are required to affect change, right? They're just there to get along, to go along, or to just to improve their resume. So that becomes very problematic, as we see even happening in other areas of this whole, the initiative is being pushed forward for a Black face. However, if the Black face is not steeped in anti-Black racism to really challenge the issues at the table, we're not any more further ahead. We just have someone that looks like us that's at the table, right? So I want someone who's able to be able to feed off of that plate, but also give to others and bring more around for further feasts, right? So we have to look at that. And yes, part of oh my God, I can't say this word today. So advocacy is very, very challenging, especially when you're one of the few Black or racialized faces at the table. You have to have strength. You have to have conviction, because if you're someone who isn't able to, shoulder the pushback and the challenges that's going to happen, you will fold, you will crumble. And a lot of times, again, it's about sometimes we ask that question, why is it always the same people we're seeing in these places? Because they're the only ones that can shoulder the burden. They've been the only ones been able to fight and challenge and push so that others can come in. But to your point, it's about nurturing and building and bring people forward. And when we think about athletics, where our athletes are not compensated appropriately, like they're coming out of pocket. Like when we talk about this standard of grading that our athletes are given, it's barely any money to even have them deal with their housing. So when you think about training, that's supplements, that's massages, that's clothing, that's the travel, that's your, if you're dealing with athletics, your spikes, so many things that you require to be able to eat appropriately, right? So what we're giving our athletes is minuscule compared to what we see the US or even Germany or Russia pumps into their athletes to ensure that they get the best out of them. So we have to even change our whole framework of funding. We have to change our framework of sponsorship that's given to athletes, because even if we go back to the Ben Johnson scenario, right? So if we go with the debacle of what took place with the 88 Olympics, and then all of track and field was dismantled. So when we used to have multiple clubs around the province where you would have hundreds of kids participate and training on a daily basis, that all just went by the wayside. So now you only have a few snippets of one or two clubs up and, a small sampling of individuals. If we get back to putting in proper funding, getting our kids engaged, we will now see a plethora of new talent that's able to come forward and fund and train it properly. So when you think about Felicia George, our hurdler, our beautiful Canadian Guyanese, by the way, that, is there out there doing her part, all that she has to do in the States. And then she, she would do a multi-sport with bobsled for a a little while and now retraining, coming back. You look at, DeGrasse and the rest of them, everyone is working hard. Now for DeGrasse, you see him doing the commercials, so hopefully he's getting compensated appropriately. But our athletes shouldn't have to be taken on so much to just train, because the whole objective is to get the best out of them. They're representing us, so let's compensate our athletes appropriately.
Yeah, and I know that hasn't changed. Way back when I first came to Canada, I got involved in field hockey because I represented Guyana in field hockey. And when you went on tour, everything was paid for. And when I was selected on the Ontario team, what they said to me was, you put up the money up front and we'll repay you. And I was a student at the time and I thought, nah, not doing it. As a result of that, I never pursued that opportunity.
And you think about it, what a loss for our country, right? And you can see that snowball into a multitude of individuals that, to your point, if you're studying, if it's a matter of studying and finalizing a degree or utilizing funds to be on a field to train, they're going to give up the athletics piece because we know that certificate diploma is far more important. So it's not a good look, and Canada has to do way better because we do have the resources and the funding to appropriately be able to take care of our athletes.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's so many other topics about change that is necessary if Canada really wants to be a world-class sports country. Mm-hmm. We're way behind many of the other industrialized nations, but I don't think that should deter anyone who wants to be involved in sport or in track and field from doing their bit. It just means that you have to find supports elsewhere.
But it also becomes difficult. Because if you don't have the means, and again, we're having people having to categorize what's more important, then again, you are leaving out a certain grouping of individuals who could potentially be the best. It doesn't matter what sport it might be, but if I have to pick or choose, or they have to pick or choose between eating their meal or completing a diploma rather than going out and dedicating the 8 hours or the 6 hours a day to their skill set that they could do, it's hard. It's extremely hard, and it makes it difficult.
Yeah. I think we have to get our corporations to step up and really support athletes in a much better way. Mm-hmm. There will be young people who watch these segments. As a former athlete, what advice would you give anyone getting into track and field or who wants to get into track and field?
Track or field or whatever sport,
any sport,
right? Like, just go for it. Listen, athletics is one of the best things. One, you're in shape, right? So your body mechanics, learning coordination, all of that just becomes even better. You build relationships, you learn how to collaboratively work with individuals, even if you disagree. And so even times, again, it also empowers your voice, because there are times even in track and field with my teammates, I'd be like, no, I'm not doing that, or I'm not running on this relay today, or whatever the case may be, because I have my position and my stance. But you start to have the confidence within yourself. Once you understand what your body can do, you will thoroughly enjoy it. And then you can make that determination as you grow as to, do I pursue this further, or will I put something else as a priority? But I would tell any young child, if you have an interest in the sport or you see something that looks cool, go after it. And again, it comes back to our government funding. I'm a lady, we're older ladies per se. I'm in my 50s, and I think about participation that used to occur. The government funded those programs in Park and Rec, so you would have somewhere to go that was funded, and the people took care of you, and you learned and you trained, and you could come back, and it was always there for you. We have to get back to it. Right? We really have to get back to funding those sources. And we think about what our children are doing, that they're just sitting on computers and they're not engaged. Like, we have to start to also, as parents and grandparents, get out of that fear that became this big wave also in the 80s, where we thought kids were going to be kidnapped because there were, different serial incidents that were taking place on a serious level, right? People got fearful and started to lock their children in. We have to start to, again, know our neighbors, have those street conversations, have the street hockey happening, go go to the park and have the kids play the soccers, and those people who have the skill set start to train and do more. Let's have a little bit more of a belief in each other. And I think this COVID could also be really good. Yes, we've been insulated with it, but it also gives everybody a clear understanding to reflect now and say, we need to do more. There's a collective good that we need to do to even know who are our neighbors, because we lost track of that. So we have to get back to this. To any of the young people, and as an educator myself, who also does coaching when school's back in, do it. Let nothing stop you. Even if you think someone's faster or greater or jumps higher or can swim faster, or whatever the case is, get out there and do it. Because with athletics, you learn, you get coached, you get trained. So you'll be surprised how what you thought you may have been deficient in or could not do, all of a sudden, a year, 2 years later, you could be one of the best. Wonderful.
Yvette, it's been a pleasure chatting with you this afternoon. I think we can continue chatting for another hour or so. But it's been wonderful. And thank you. Thanks for all of your insights and all of your encouragement for young people. And it's been great chatting with you. Hopefully we'll do that again.
Yes, I would love that. And it was a pleasure meeting you, Jennifer, and all the best to you and your family. And maybe one of the days I'll get out there and you'll show me how to do a few little tricks in your field. And maybe we'll have a little runoff.
Well, it's interesting. No, I don't run anymore.
Okay.
I don't run anymore. Last year, I thought I would play badminton against a friend, and I thought, no, you've got to run if you're playing badminton, and you don't do that. You're much older now, so I've got to remember.
Okay, we'll try ping pong.
Yes.
Okay, all right,
okay.
We found something. We found our mutual ground. All right, be well, my dear.
Likewise.
Okay.
Nice to have met you.
My pleasure.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 woman growing strong. 100 woman where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached